Welcome to the first, and maybe only installment, of what I'm calling the PlayStation 2 Grab Bag. It's no secret that the PS2 has a ridiculous amount of games, many of which people barely even remember if they even knew existed in the first place. In this video, I'll be talking about, sort of reviewing 5 random PS2 games. Random to you, I picked them out, but anyway, let's get this thing started. Without further ado, our first game is... Ed, Edd n Eddy is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and I have zero shame in admitting that. I would, however, feel some amount of shame if I admitted that Ed, Edd n Eddy The Misadventures was my favorite game. It's not, I assure you. Please take my opinion seriously. This game is a classic example of what it looked like when a company saw that video games were a way to make money off a popular license, so they gave a publisher some low sum of money to make one, and that publisher got a fairly unnoteworthy studio to develop it, and that studio made what looked to be, by all accounts, a functioning video game. It is fully functional, don't get me wrong, but it's also incredibly safe. If someone were to say The Misadventures is a horrible game, I'd say that opinion is just as silly as saying it's great. It's completely average and largely competent. It's a mid-2000s licensed game of a Cartoon Network television show. It sticks close enough to the source material that nobody would ever question what this game is about, while also not nailing it flawlessly so as to be a near replication of the show. As an interactive version of Ed, Edd n Eddy, it does about as much as you could reasonably expect for the budget it had and the time period it resided in. Maybe if the gaming gods smiled down on us, we could get the Ed, Edd n Eddy equivalent to the South Park RPG games, but this is what we have and likely all we'll ever have. As much as it is a mostly competent game, there's a lot here that's either annoying, bad, or strange. The models are pretty frightening if I'm being honest, Kevin's Jay Leno chin being a noteworthy example. I know he had a shovel chin in the show, but good lord. The sound design was one of the first things that turned me off from the game, even though it's, on a surface level, exactly what you'd expect. The jazzy background music is present as you play, which might, on paper, sound like a positive, but... it just never stops. You never get a break from it. It starts to drive you fucking insane. When I first wanted to do a review on this game back in 2020, I stopped playing within 10 minutes of turning it on, and a major factor was this goddamn music. Even the pause screen isn't a safe space. It assaults you with the repeat of the show's title song. Nowhere in this game is there a moment of peace and quiet, and one boss fight in particular was where I really started to lose my mind. There aren't many boss fights in total, thankfully, since the gameplay isn't smooth by any means, but the end fight against the Cankers is rough since it combines so many of the game's annoyances into one encounter. May seemingly only has one single line of dialogue, and they spammed it throughout the fight.
Special delivery! 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 I love a good chase. Special delivery! Special delivery! Special delivery!
They went entirely overboard with the sound design in this game. It's truly maddening. Worse, though, are the many enemies that exist solely to pester you. Squirrels are in this level, for some reason, which grab onto your legs. You'll have to jump a few times and smack them a bit, only for them to respawn moments later. There are so many of these worthless enemies in the game, and they never offer anything close to an enjoyable fight. Whack them once or twice, or, in the case of the dogs, like 5 times, and then they vanish. If I had to guess, these guys were probably added in because this is a video game, and games need enemies, so that's that. I realize this is for kids, but I'm sure most of the kids who played this were pretty bored with the many dogs, rats, crabs, and so on that litter these stages. The Ed Boys attack animations are all mostly rough too. The only one that has any range to avoid getting hit as you swing is Eddie's. Double D's ruler swing was particularly bad. When you finish a level, be it by defeating a boss or collecting a thing, the game doesn't even let whatever just happened play out. It stops the action to tell you the mission is finished. It's extremely jarring and anticlimactic. It's cool that this game was written by the same writer as the show, and that the original voice actors are here to voice the game characters, but it feels like we got the B-roll for this game. Many of the scenarios are reminiscent of the things that happened in the show, but it's a watered-down and bizarre version of it. It has all the dressings of being the same cartoon, but it feels off. All that said, the game has a lot of positive qualities as well. The 3 save files you can choose are named Ed, Ed, and Eddie. The main collectibles are Jawbreakers and Quarters, the latter being used to buy more Jawbreakers from the claw machine that we saw in the Jib episode, which is awesome. The Eds all having their own distinct abilities is fun, such as Double D being able to interact with electronics and slingshotting water balloons, Ed being able to lift objects over his head to throw around, and Eddie throwing stink bombs. All of them have their own team formation too. Eddie has the Tower of Ed, which lets him reach high areas and allows the team to cross narrow platforms. Ed has a Batter Ed Ram, which is the fastest way to move and can mow down certain blockades, and Double D gets a boost to jump over or on top of high obstacles. The last one never looks good, though he'll usually clip through the environment instead of jumping over it. All of them have their proper running animations, which is, in my opinion, absolutely necessary for a game with this license to feel right at all, so it's good that they nailed that aspect of the visuals. The environments are great too. Regardless if the stories that go along with them match up with the show, the settings are all enjoyable to exist in since they look how you'd expect them to. They crammed basically every notable location into this game: the cul-de-sac, the park, Rolf's farm, the sewer, the backyard party, which even has a few beehives later on, the alleyways, the school, the construction site, the trailer park, the haunted empty house, a rendition of Edtropolis, and the junkyard. Plus, the junkyard swaps out your usual weapons with spacey-themed guns and swords. Well, at least for Double D. One level involves the Urban Rangers, a few the Cankers, and in all of them you get to chase a chicken as Ed. Besides the poor combat and usual collecting of stuff, there's some first-person shooting, albeit very light and short-lived, and a stealth section even. I think, all things considered, this is a decent kids game. It is a bit annoying in some sections, but there's a good amount of variety thrown in here, which will help them learn and gain skills for more advanced games. After all, there's platforming, puzzle solving, shooting, combat, racing, boss battles, and stealth. Considering this is a licensed game based on a children's cartoon show, the target demographic was basically spot on. Best of all, they included the absolute banger that is My Best Friend Plank. Although the game is good enough, being a big fan of the show, it is fun to dream. Maybe if this was made a decade later by a more ambitious team, we could have had a self-insert character come into the cul-de-sac, joining the Ed Boys, or going against them like Jimmy did in that one episode, crafting your own scams. Some type of RPG life sim, instead of a dumbed-down, forced combat mission structure thing. Maybe the main goal would be to win over the neighborhood kids or something. I don't know, that game sounds kind of fun. Although it isn't in the Ed, Edd n Eddy universe, My Street offers something akin to what I just described. You are the new kid who just moved into town, and your mom wants you to make some friends before school starts. Apparently there's a bully that nobody likes, and you have 18 days to win the neighborhood kids over and put the bully in his place. The character customization on offer was pretty fun. I went with a Frankenstein's monster look, only fitting for April Fools, right? There's also a blackface adjacent ski mask option, which... oh my. It's funny that there's a dedicated button to change your expression. You can't do this in cutscenes, sadly, but considering that none of the other buttons do anything when not in a minigame, this was an interesting inclusion. Surprisingly, this game is fully voice acted, and the dialogue is off the wall in some cases.
You're not a hodad after all. Hey, brah, Myron would probably like to meet ya. He's like sort of a Mervin, but cool.
Dang, Boo! You really dropped the smiznak on that freaky haircut-having bizzo clown suit wearing no-account bully.
His pucker factor's gotta be like Mondo off the charts. Good on ya, brah. School's gonna be like nectar from now on.
I don't know if this is how kids talked in 2002. Well, I was a kid around that time, and I didn't talk like that, but I don't know, maybe it's a dialect thing. Also, holy shit, these kids are mean. They trash talk everyone, sometimes their own teammates.
We got those barf bags gagging.
The beating continues.
Now you're just blowing swamp gas. Pull in your horns, I got it.
Well, then get it already. Gross me out.
We're right sorry for you.
Mine, dweeb.
We knew you were freaks.
Oh, dude's starting to choke. It's mine, Squid.
Get it, Chatterhead.
Heck yeah, that's how kids are, so I get it. The gimmick of you being a kid is used really well when it comes to explaining the usual constraints you'd expect from a video game, as well as the limitations of your player character. You can't swim to get the beach ball right away, since your mom says no swimming without the proper gear. Can't wander too far off the map, or your mom will count to 3, warping you back to the play area. Can't stay up too late, you have a bedtime after all. Can't take or use other people's things willy-nilly, you didn't ask permission. You can't actually ask permission, you have to become friends with them, and in this universe, that means clobbering them 3 times at their own minigame. Not everyone has items, but they all, more or less, grant access to the next kid's minigame. At the start, you'll have a small sum of money, and the only thing you can afford are marbles. This lets you play with the Marble Girl. Win 3 times, and you can use her flippers, which lets you swim out to retrieve the beach ball for Sean. His minigame is volleyball, and after winning 3 times there, he gives you the secret code to the Smart Kid's garage, and so on. The minigames themselves are pretty hit or miss. The marble one seemed almost deceivingly simple. If you camp out near the goal, you can essentially steal all their balls by turning them your color. It got a little harder on the 3rd one, and you can get knocked off too, but the AI wasn't the best here. You can play these games locally with your in-real-life friends in play mode at the main menu, which is kind of neat, but wait, I'm sorry, this game had online support? I'd be amazed if there were even a dozen people online at this game's peak. Anyway, the volleyball minigame was really where my street first stumped me. It is fun, I enjoy it, but it felt awfully inconsistent whether you'll hit the ball or not. There's a 3-hit rule per side, and you can bump, set, or spike it. You can bump it in any of those 3 hits, but trying to set it on the first hit often resulted in it landing on my head or it not going anywhere. You can't hit the ball twice in a row, but sometimes my teammate would refuse to go for it when we were too close to each other. It's like she thought she hit it when she didn't. Spiking is very difficult. It doesn't work unless you get the timing perfectly, it felt like. Overall, it is a solid volleyball minigame, especially for how low budget this game looks. Anyway, I was on this one for a few days, and I didn't realize how much there was to do before school started to finish the game with the good ending. Your mom early on says the farm could use some help. You do some god-awful chores like feeding the chickens, getting the slop for the pigs, and taking the cow outside. Once you do that, you can play the Farm Girls game, and it's nuts. Collecting chickens and chicks will get you points, and pigs remove a huge chunk, so you can send them over to your teammates, and they can do the same to you. You basically have to run around, placing arrows on the ground for the animals to follow. Since it's such a wacky and strange game, I stopped playing after I lost the first time, thinking it was a waste of time. I then went back to trying volleyball for a while. Well, this almost ruined my playthrough. I did glance at a guide after a while, sorry to say, and the farming thing is vital. You need to win all 3 rounds, preferably as early as you can. Once you do, you earn the privilege of taking over the girl's chores for her every day, which gets you $5. You need $33 to get the RC car, which is required for the good ending. This means at least 6 days of chores, a third of your days. I'll just say for now, I barely made it, but we're not there yet. I eventually got good at volleyball and gained access to the next kid's minigame, which is basically Puyo Puyo, a puzzle game I'm atrocious at and hate. I don't even have any worthwhile insight or critique, I just can't stand puzzle games like Puyo. After mindlessly flailing and hoping I would win eventually, I finally did it. You get access to his gas can, you fill it up and bring it to Lawnmower Girl. Lawnmower races were mostly enjoyable. You can get points for going over weeds, and lose points for going over flowers, and likely some other stuff too. I mostly focused on laps though, which gets you a decent amount of points while everyone bickers and slams into each other. Each day before I took part in the Puyo Puyo and lawnmower races, I was doing farm work. Feed the chickens, feed the pigs, and take out that damned cow. Seriously, getting the cow to walk outside is beyond tedious. These chores have to be done 7 times in total for the good ending, 6 as a worker and 1 as an unpaid intern, and they just aren't very fun. I mean, they are chores, maybe they shouldn't be, but oh jeez, this fucking cow, man! Winning the lawnmower races gets you shears, which you use on the ivy behind your house, which gets you a squeaky toy. There is a dog in the bully's yard, but you can't open the gate. Or, I guess, hop over this very low fence. This is where the RC car comes in. Once you finally get your money, which I did with only a few days to spare since I was dicking around getting good at volleyball, you buy the RC car and can play with this kid. I thought, oh, the lawnmower races were easy, this'll be fine, right? Oh lord, no. Mind you, while you play all these games, time keeps ticking, 2 or 3 hours run off the clock. You start every day at 10 a.m., and most kids go home at around 6 or 7. If you fail enough, you'll simply run out of time, and have to start over, and for me, that was not an option. No, either I get the good ending now, or I'm not playing again. I'm sorry, but the Puyo Puyo and cow nonsense is too much. So, the RC races, the penultimate minigame. The first race wasn't too bad, and the second one was a little harder, but the third one, what hellspawn at Idle Minds devised this up? 2 cars go in one direction, and the other 2 go the opposite direction. There were power-ups in a few other minigames too, but here is where I found them to be crucial. Since playing it normally was impossible, the cars going the opposite direction constantly get in your way or fire their missiles at you for some reason. I once got lapped by my same direction opponent like twice in one race. I thought it was going to be game over, here's the brick wall, but thankfully I managed to pull it off and had 2 days left. You get the gate key, and I even managed to sneak in the first round of the Bullies minigame before bedtime. Usually you can't play anything past 6, as the other kids go home, and even more, you only get 1 warning of bedtime at 7:45 before your mom drags you home after another hour or so. I got the warning, but the bully was down to play. Here we go, dodgeball. Although I was worried I'd still run out of time, this minigame was surprisingly easy compared to the RC cars. The magnet power-up was awesome, since you can just run up to the line, spam the throw and catch buttons, and keep pummeling everyone in your way. Everyone gets 5 hit points before they're out, and after enough people are eliminated, the lines change, granting you more space or less space to work with. After winning, the bully cries, and then at school, everyone congratulates you. You made sure school was fun again by putting the bully in his place. While the overarching time limit is something I can appreciate, and the kids having schedules, or at least bedtimes, that are distinct is cool, there really isn't much here beyond the minigames. There's a park to play in, but that'll just waste time, and since time skips to the start of school after the 3rd round of dodgeball, dicking around on the merry-go-round by your lonesome early on is your only option, and that'll only hurt your chances of getting through everything. The window dressing of it all is kind of fun. I do think this is a solid premise, but each kid essentially being a minigame keeper and the holder of a puzzle piece item makes this world feel pretty stiff. It is a low-budget game, if you couldn't tell, so this is likely all they could do. By the way, Idle Minds, the developers, eventually went by the studio name Deck 9, and recently developed a few of the Life is Strange games. Wild stuff. All in all, a fun little game. The only thing that was blatantly incorrect about its take on a suburban neighborhood was the lack of scooters. When I was a kid, if you didn't have a scooter, you weren't one of the cool kids. You don't believe me? You don't think scooters were a huge thing in the early 2000s? Well, non-existent argumentative person, explain the next game then.
Mondo off the charts.
World Tour came out in late 2002, right at the peak of the Tony Hawk games, as Pro Skater 3 came out the year before. Clearly a cheap attempt to get some sales off of the Tony Hawk gameplay, and oh god is it unfun to play. Maybe I've just moved past liking these types of games. It has been a while since I played the Tony Hawk series, but after playing Skate, nothing else really compares. It has the usual hold X to go faster, release it to jump. Flip tricks, grabs, and grinds are mapped to the same buttons, and the objectives are all what you'd expect in a Pro Skater game. There's also a time limit, which, in my mind, drags the whole experience down. I tend not to enjoy arbitrary time limits like this, arbitrary being the key word. On a few occasions, I was seconds away from finishing off an objective or grabbing the last key, only for the timer to hit 0 and boot me out of the level. If the timer was 3 minutes and 10 seconds, I wouldn't have to defeat the boss enemies or flip the switches all over again. It also just flat out doesn't gel well with how slow and fast you move. That might sound paradoxical, but it feels like you're always at the wrong speed. When you want to go fast, all you can really do is hold down the jump button, much like in Tony Hawk, and you just watch him stiff as a board, crawling at a few miles per hour. It's so weird, since I went back to the PlayStation Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1, and man was it a breeze to get the air I wanted on a half-pipe. In World Tour, my top speed is so slow, and my hang time so pathetic, not only could I not pull off the crazy tricks I wanted, but it just looked so boring and lifeless as I was doing it. On the other end of the spectrum, when you're desperate to get your positioning right, or turn around on a dime to hit a boss enemy, your set speed makes it a huge hassle, and since you can never get off the scooter to walk around, you have to deal with this the only way the game allows, scooting forward, turning around, and trying again, which eats up your time. You can grind to go a little quicker, and the manual even suggests as much, but I didn't see much of an improvement when going from riding to grinding. In Tony Hawk, you can go from rail to rail, ground to ledge, without hassle at a quick pace. Here, there's not as much leniency. You might bail out of a grind for no reason, and the one-dimensional nature of a scooter makes certain tricks harder to deal with, as landing backwards hurts your speed, and delays any action you wanted to perform right afterwards. The input buffering is egregious in World Tour. If you press the square button twice to make sure he does a trick, he will do it twice, regardless of how long ago you pressed the button, meaning you'll likely bail when simply trying to land transitional tricks. All of this is quite the shame, because there are some good things here. Exploring around and doing all the checklist goals is enjoyable full stop. Some of the tasks they ask you to do are fun on their own, or finding them in and of itself is the fun part, since you're only given the 2-second scene at the start to work from. Maybe if this didn't have a 3-minute time limit, investigating the levels for their secrets could be fun. The stages are all gimmicky and have a certain theme, the standout one for me being the theme park. Well, that was the one that had the objective, beat down the flamboyant flamer, which is just... Even with those aforementioned positives, the game still feels kind of awkward. I liked the tasks where you do 5 of a thing within a level, but the camera is so bad on those bits, it sticks to what's going on with the interactable object instead of your character for a long time, so you'll likely run into a wall or fall down or something while this is happening. Plus, it saves to the memory card every single time your 3 minutes are up, even if you didn't accomplish anything, and you can't see that preview video of the objectives unless you quit out and select that stage again, which incurs another load screen. Ugh, this game just isn't a fun time. The soundtrack isn't bad, but it doesn't hit the highs of the Tony Hawk games of the time. It sounds like they were going for it, but I don't know, maybe it's my nostalgia talking, but nothing really stood out. Well, there was that one song that kept getting my attention, since the opening few notes sounded like a track from NBA Street Volume 2. But it wasn't even close, so if anything, it made me like the World Tour song less. Maybe NBA Street could be a pick for a second installment to this series. Anyway, it is cool that if you collect the 3 CDs in a level, you'll unlock a new song for the playlist to cycle through. That's a neat detail, one that would be rad as hell for the Tony Hawk games. Then again, who knows, maybe they did do that and I'm misremembering. I could talk about the attempt at a real story and the unlockable scooters and characters, but I think we're done here. Tony Hawk Pro Skater Killer, this was not. Not that the game box or anything pretended that it was, but you remember these days, right? Where every knockoff game in a genre was the next Halo killer or whatever? Well, Tribe's Aerial Assault is no exception. The back of the box says, "Goodbye Halo," the source of that quote being PlayStation Magazine. Yeah, they aren't biased at all. I had no knowledge of what Tribes was. I saw this at a game store and thought the guy on the cover reminded me of the Earth Defense Force Wing Diver unit. Since I was buying a used PS2, the store clerk threw it in for free. Well, this isn't anything like Earth Defense Force. This is actually the 3rd Tribes game, the first 2 being on the PC. The reason I feel totally fine talking about this game while having no knowledge of those 2 is that Tribe's Aerial Assault was exclusive to the PS2. They apparently hoped they could make the transition like Bungie did, getting a keyboard and mouse focused game to work on a home console with a controller. Although a PS2 exclusive, this got released alongside the other Tribes games as freeware by Hi-Res Studios in 2015, so you can technically play this on PC, and it does look like there are some dedicated fans of this game specifically active to this day. The online component is said to be where this game really shines, but I'm not interested in looking at the online or the PC version. The mindset of a teenager in 2002 is what I'm viewing this as. Just imagine being 14, only having a PS2, and buying this game, the one that says "Goodbye Halo" on the back, with your meager allowance money. That poor soul. This is really nothing like Halo, so I have no idea where that comparison came from outside of trying to drum up an audience for the game. I would say maybe the "Goodbye Halo" was meant in a different context and the box art people grabbed a less than honest quote, but there isn't a ... and there's a period at the end. This looks like its own sentence. I did a little more snooping and found that specific quote in the PlayStation Magazine, June 2002 edition. There it is, front and center as the subtitle. However, you may notice this isn't a review, it's a preview. This person hasn't played the game, they're speculating. They say Tribes on the PC basically taught Halo all it knows. I mean, it's obvious this is nothing like Halo, right? This more resembles Unreal Tournament or Quake, a couple more game series I haven't played. The camera view can be in first or third person, but because the speed is so fast and the range of your gun so long, You may not even see your target, instead they're colored arrow above them as you fire away. Bigger battles can turn to chaos, and your health pool is small enough that it's very easy to die from a speedy boy or a dude off screen. I like that you can basically climb every bit of terrain. It makes some of the more up and down maps kind of interesting, but the range and speed factor seriously turned me off. I'm much more of a Battlefront tempo kind of guy, but that game was 2 years out still, so really these devs were doing the best they could. 2002 is still very early when it comes to console shooters, and even though PC players might laugh at controller users nowadays, back then it wasn't even something that was attempted often, if ever. These days, we regularly see every FPS game launch on the Xbox and PlayStation, but twin-stick controls were still relatively new in 2002, and certainly weren't so ubiquitous that everyone could transfer their skills to the next one without hassle. This might explain the auto-targeting option, which, with the press of a button, will have your gun aim where your opponent is going. It's not perfect, but it can certainly help while you get used to the controls. The control scheme itself is another smoking gun of this being an early 2000s game. A shooter of any kind coming out these days would never dare map the shoot button to the left trigger, or L2 for the PS2. You can flip the controls horizontally, but not only can you not change where you want specific actions on the controller, in campaign mode you aren't even given this. L2 is how you fire, get used to it, you idiot. Probably an oversight, but really, you're not going to let me map the jump button to X? I have to press R or L1? The jetpack is the main gimmick of this Tribes game, it seems, and I'm not in love with its execution. You'll essentially be clutching the controller, all shoulder buttons being pressed and unpressed at regular intervals, which just feels super awkward. In the tutorial, the jetpack felt okay, but like I said, the speed of the real game is just wild. Speaking of that tutorial, it seems like they wanted to be absolutely sure players got used to the controls, as it introduces looking up and down, left and right, moving forward and backward, and side to side, all in its own separate section. You literally can't do any of these basic functions until he's done explaining them.
Easy enough. Now, you can move sideways or strafe by moving the left analog stick left and right. This will allow you to remain facing forward while performing evasive maneuvers. Strafe left and right now.
With all of the tools they showed off, and the vehicles, it feels like this could have been a really fun, tactical game. You can deploy a bunch of different things onto the terrain, such as turrets and equipment switchers. You can switch up your ammo from light, medium, and heavy, which all grant certain weapon choices. Throwing a flare attracts homing weapons towards it, and if you keep holding the jetpack button after it's used up and see the red meter, it's said that too will be a target for enemies to home onto with certain heat-seeking weapons, which is a really neat detail. One of the aircraft vehicles was a bomber, where you can see an undercarriage camera angle of your falling explosives. Super cool, but at least for my sensibilities, the breakneck pace of the moment-to-moment gameplay wasn't for me. There's a bunch of modes and maps to pick from, and the only time I could say I genuinely enjoyed myself was with the Hunter mode on a specific map. The rocket launcher seems to be a favorite, and constantly firing rockets into a group of enemies, seeing their flags fly every which way like fireworks, and hearing their wild screams was hilarious. It was kind of interesting. I don't think I've seen a game mode like this before. It's a free-for-all, but when you die, you drop the flags you were holding. You get points by taking the flags to a certain point on the map, and it looks like certain color flags are worth more, or the higher the number when you return them, the more points each flag is worth. I'm not totally sure. Either way, yeah, I had fun with this, but the rest of the game, not so much. Imagining like a Battlefront 3 or something that had some of these cool tactical tools and maybe even that game mode sounds fucking awesome. Now, how could this April Fool's video be complete without a green character of some kind making an appearance? Still no Hulk, instead another Shrek game. Shrek Super Slam is very much a Super Smash Bros. Clone. It's not nearly as good, of course, but it is surprisingly adequate. You have a few combos, you can charge up your attacks, you have a shield to block, and even a grab. Items fall onto the map for you to play around with, most of them Shrek-themed in some way. The way to score points isn't knocking your enemies off the stage, nor dwindling their health bar to 0. Instead, you work to get your slam meter built up, and hitting your special attack will give you 1 point, and remove 1 point from the enemy you hit. You get a few chances to hit with it before it's wasted, but I found that avoiding enemy slam attacks wasn't something I could consistently do. Some are ranged and some charge around, so it's tough to avoid those 3 or 4 times in a row before their slam meter depletes. I recently played Multiverses and Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, and I must say, Shrek Super Slam is a bit more impressive given that it didn't outright copy and paste Smash Bros. Do I prefer the Super Slam way of earning points? Probably not, but for a licensed fighting game aimed at kids, yeah, this is alright. Initially I was going to say building up your meter to get a slam, scoring a single point, then restarting the process was a bit simplistic and made the gameplay feel a bit inconsequential. You're both building up your meter as you go, so really, whoever gets the last slam, if you've been trading back and forth, is the winner. However, that's not entirely different from how it works in Smash Bros. Or a traditional fighting game. You both probably got some hits in and damage each other in the first life. If you knock them off first, they'll likely get you off next if you're close to equally matched, and if not, you'll combo them again before they get the chance. That's essentially the same here, isn't it? The only thing missing is user error like self-destructs. I don't think the game is as deep as Smash Bros. By any means, but there are people who play this game competitively. I can't pretend the game looks very fun at this high of skill level, with all the flaily spacing moves going on and one player running away while the other has their slam charged, but then again, I can't pretend Shrek Super Slam looks fun at any skill level. I'll give it credit, there is enough room here for players to develop the best strats necessary to have a mostly competitive and goofy-looking tournament, so it has that going for it. That is a compliment, by the way. It's not like you can pick any old mediocre licensed game from the past and develop a competitive scene over it. This one had enough juice to spark some interest. I'd be more interested in seeing that Evangelion Smash Bros. Fighting game get some random attention, but then again, maybe it's garbage, I don't know. There's a campaign mode in addition to an event-like Mega Challenge mode. The campaign was a surprise. The excuse to tell random stories made sense. Shrek and Donkey were trying to get the dronkies to sleep. This opened the door for some fun and kooky interactions, such as Prince Charming in an episode of Knights, going after Donkey like an episode of Cops, Gingerbread Man showing off his sick house and Slick Ride in a My Crib-esque style intro before a random gnome crashed into his house, a fairly spooky Pinocchio bit where he replaces Shrek and Fiona with puppet versions of themselves, and best of all, the very first one is a face-off between Gingerbread Man and Puss in Boots. It's really good. I'm gonna play some audio for this one.
Milk and cookies? You monster!
Just mosey along, little churro. This is between me and my afternoon snack.
Fat chance, Hairball! So long as I wear a badge, no cookies get crumbled in this town! That's gross! Let's draw!
Just amazing. In retrospect, it makes sense why quite a few of these chapters have Gingerbread Man in them, since he's the only one who has his original voice actor from the movies, Conrad Vernon. Fair shake to James Arnold Taylor, Obi-Wan from Clone Wars of course, who voiced Prince Charming in all of the games he's in. Same for Andre Sagluzzo, the tried-and-true video game voiceover for Puss in Boots, and Mark Mosley for Donkey. You can earn some new costumes in the campaign chapters, but most of the unlocks are tied to the Mega Challenge mode, it seems. About half of the roster is unavailable initially, and it must be earned through these challenges and tournaments. It looks like they added a lot of fun characters, which is really cool. That said, the event mode isn't all that fun, at least I didn't think so, and keeping the Big Bad Wolf as one of the final unlocks is asking quite a lot. I bet tons of kids had a blast with these challenges though, so I can't complain. Even better if they played and liked Super Smash Bros. Melee, since this is so analogous to its event mode. There's a ton of stages too, some unlockable as well. Since you can grab the objects in each level and break them and so on, it gives each stage a little more personality, which is awesome. In the Dragon Lair one, you can even go under the coins and pop up somewhere else. What a cool game. Not one I'm interested in playing a whole lot, but nonetheless, very cool. And that's a wrap. Thanks for being a part of the first and maybe only edition of the PlayStation 2 Grab Bag. I've been your host, Dorkaxe. That's D-O-R-K-E... Yeah, fuck it, you know how to spell it.